What's interesting is that the Jewish community, they've controlled entertainment, they've controlled Hollywood, they've controlled art images and what other ethnic groups think of themselves, but they try to absolve themselves of it. And what they'll do is they'll go, oh, this is all toxic white males doing this.
Are white people dominant?
I mean, white people have most of the power, money, leadership positions, capital.
Where?
Chief executives of most corporations, most college presidents, most political leaders in the U.S.
Right. The biggest lobby in America is AIPAC, Israel-funded lobbying.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, 98% of the politicians that they fund win their elections, and even like Biden's cabinet is all Jewish. If you look at Trump example, he married into the Kushner family, or his daughter married into the Kushner family. It's like maybe on the TV it makes it seem like white people are predominantly controlling everything, but if you actually look at the names behind the scenes, a lot of it are the undercover Jews.
So that even like I would say that expression, undercover Jews. Yeah, I mean it's
well, like Jonah Hill, for example, his real name is Jonah Hill Feldstein because he doesn't want people to know like his ethnicity.
So it seems to me like you have an agenda with this.
No, I don't. I don't have agenda.
I should probably have asked what this is for before I.
No, it's just interviewing people.
So who are you? Why are you conducting the interviews? What's the purpose of this?
Well, I wanted to hear the social climate about like Israel-Palestine.
Yeah. It's not the first thing that you asked.
The first thing I asked was, are you a good person? Yeah.
I don't think you did ask me that.
What was the first question I asked you?
I can't remember.
I think I just asked how you are, or what's your name.
Yeah.
Again, our communities have such a deep history. I am proud.
A lot more similarities than we do differences.
Way more similarities. And there are those people who want to divide us. There are those people who want to tear us apart. There are those people who want to instrumentalize black people against Jews, Jews against black people. Like, we cannot allow that to happen.
We don't have no power. No matter what we do, we can all click up. We don't have no organization that holds any weight. NAACP don't hold no weight.
American Jews played a key role in the founding and funding of some of the most important civil rights organizations.
We don't have no organization that holds no weight. You can't speak bad about a Jewish person because they have organizations and they're a close-knit group of people in power who will bring you down. Same thing with gays. You can't say nothing bad about gays because they move as a unit. Black people don't have that. So I would much rather not even have this conversation. I have a lot of great Jewish people in my corner. I have a Jewish conglomerate.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know why there's not a lot of Jewish rappers? Because there's Jewish owners and Jewish CEOs. They run these labels. They're the bosses. That's why.
You never hear about Jimmy Iovine, Elliot Grange, Lucien Grange, Leo Cohen, Todd Moskowitz. All of these execs, they prop these guys up and they only give them deals if they partake in the debauchery with them, allegedly. And people like Diddy and Eazy-E and Jay Prince and Luke and Russell Simmons, and Baby from Cash Money, let's not forget him. What they've done is they've given people who have taken advantage of black ignorance, black lack of education, black lack of opportunity, giving them the right to monetize our dysfunction and our shame because those individuals I just named, those black music moguls, say it's black culture.
I love Jewish people, but they're powerful. I don't want them to misconstrue anything I'm saying or take anything I'm saying the wrong way.
Why should a black man in America care about what's going on in these other places when we're still fighting for a lot of civil liberties here?
Because it's not an either or claim. I got that too in the last couple of weeks. Yo, why are you over in Palestine all the time?
It makes sense. I understand why people would say that.
Do something for black people.
If black people are so effed up here, why fight somebody else's fight?
Right, and I guess, one, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? Like, I can fight for black people here and struggle abroad. But again, there's a relationship between the two. The New York City police, they're killing us. But they're being trained by Israeli security forces. So Israeli police,
really?
Yes, they're being trained on New York City police and in other cities as well. So there's a connection between the two. Malcolm X cared about this issue. Malcolm X is my hero. So when Malcolm X cared about this issue, when he wrote a piece on this in the Egyptian Gazette called Zionist Logic, I cared in the fall of '64. I cared because Malcolm cared. Malcolm, and when everybody here, go back and listen to Message to the Grassroots, when Malcolm is talking about what a revolution looks like. And he was talking about us being connected globally, right? That's why I care about this issue. The Black Panthers cared about this issue. SNCC cared about this issue in the summer of '67. There's a lot of people, black freedom fighters who we admire. People say, be like Malcolm, be like Assata. People want to march and be like Huey. People want to be like Angela. They all cared about Palestine.
I always felt uncomfortable with white people who pretend like they care about black people and who were like posting Black Lives Matter stuff. And I never understood it until now. All those white people were Jews. Now it makes sense. It always gave performative. And I could never put my finger on it because I was like, I don't want to be that black person that, I see white people making an effort. And for some reason, I'm uncomfortable with it. What the heck is that about? It's because they were Jews the whole time. There's no way they believe in freedom and liberation when they've been casually enslaving the Palestinian people for over 75 years and counting. They've been promoting that, endorsing that, protecting all of their leaders who have been doing that. Like, there's no way in hell they actually believed that black people deserve freedom. They never were for our liberation. And now I get it. It's because they're Jews. Like, these people, when I see racists now, I think they're all Jews. Just had an epiphany. I need to go to Tiffany's. Now it makes sense. Why I never felt comfortable with them. Now it makes sense why there was always something that was just there that was nagging at my soul. Like, they're lying, but I couldn't place it, and I didn't want to say anything out loud because I was like, I don't want to seem like I'm holding the movement back, but I'm telling y'all they're lying. There's no way these people actually want freedom for us. And it always makes sense now why they would always come in and try to find some way to water down the movement and to play some sort of victim and to destroy the movement from the inside out. It makes sense now because for so many years, black people and the Palestinian people have been aligned and have been allies trying to help each other get freedom, trying to get liberation together. Now it makes sense why they've been so invested in the black community and black movements and black progress. And they've been doing everything to keep black people from ever moving forward. We get it now. They don't want us to move forward because of the allyship we always had with Palestinian people, and because they can't continue the hypocrisy anymore. If they are saying, yeah, black people deserve freedom because we're human beings, it is our right, we have God-given free will, and y'all never had the right ever, and you will never have the right to take our free will away from us. If they can acknowledge that with black people, then why the hell can't they acknowledge that with the brown people, the Palestinian people that they've been enslaving for 75 years and counting? The hypocrisy just wouldn't add up. So it's all been performative this whole time. It's all been performative. And now I get it. And like I said, when I see racist people now, I immediately think you're probably a Jew. Yeah, you're probably one of those.
28, 1945. New York City was shrouded in a smothering blanket of fog when scores of people heard a low-flying plane heading south. Then an explosion. What had been a wartime dread had happened. An Army bomber lost in the overcast had crashed into the towering Empire State Building. Scores of warplanes passed over New York daily, but this one had wandered from the airport beam, dropped down to 900 feet, and ripped into the building. Parts of it blasting completely through the 79th floor and landing across the street. With most elevators knocked out, firemen had to drag hoses 11 flights from the 68th floor to fight the flames. Disaster units organized for wartime went into action. When a count was made, 3 crewmen were dead, as well as 10 persons working in the skyscraper, including one man blown from his office to the parapet below. 25 persons were injured in a disaster that remains the most singular in New York City's history. High-octane gas from ruptured fuel tanks threw a sheet of flame through the offices. This was a funeral pyre for most of the victims, who could not be identified for many days. Although the war was ended in Europe, Japan was still fighting, and this disaster brought home to New Yorkers some of the stark horror of war. There was one miracle. An elevator operator plunged with her car from the 75th floor to the sub-basement. Her back was broken, and she spent a year in the hospital. However, she lived to recount the disaster on 34th Street.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 4. We're back. Thank you guys for watching the previous episodes. I hope you guys are feeling a little bit more smarter. I feel like I'm doing my whole Candace Owens thing at the moment right now. Because as I said, Greek ideology earlier about beliefs on who has a right to exist, and part of their belief system was around charisma, and they felt people that didn't have blonde hair, blue eyes, they didn't have leadership qualities, and they didn't have charisma in order to be called a leader. So this is why there's a deep underlying issue whenever there's someone of African descent that speaks their mind. Kanye West speaks, and sometimes he just says bold things that might be about his belief in himself, but then he's also leaked truth into a lot of statements that he's made, and people are finding that out now around Jews and Africans and who and what we are and the connections and what those things are. And not all Africans are of Jewish descent, which that's sort of like a mythological thing that's been pervading within America, that all African Americans are from some certain tribe of Judah. I would say that we're the first humans on earth, so that by default makes us, I guess, tribe of Judah. But we are the original humans, so we all didn't come from Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. But just in general, we do have deep connections with the rest of the planet. So this episode is going to touch on a bit about the Jewish involvement after the slave trade within the Confederacy, and what ended up becoming later the foundation of the Ku Klux Klan, what that exactly means and who caused it. And if you may not know, there was a dual alliance that ended up happening during the Civil War with Albert Pike and a guy by the name of Judah Benjamin. Judah Benjamin was of Jewish descent, the name Judah, or name Benjamin. I have relatives in my family who have biblical names, and it makes me cringe because we're not from that particular section of the world, and so therefore I didn't want to name my kid anything English or something of that sort, because we're not from England. Or I didn't want to give him a Hebrew name because we're not of that ethnicity, but we're products of the slave trade. So we were given Bibles so we wouldn't break our slave captors' necks, essentially. We were given Bibles to suppress us. So this is going to go into a bit about that. And you're going to find out that there was a dual alliance between Albert Pike, who's a notorious Freemason, and Judah Benjamin, who was a part of the Jewish Freemasons, or as we like to call B'nai Brith. That there was a dual alliance made, and that dual alliance ended up sparking later the ADL of B'nai Brith and how much the ADL and the African American struggle for trying to find themselves in America, how that was co-opted by the Jewish community. Sit back and enjoy yourselves.
And what I do in the book, and I'm going to be very brief here, all the details in the book, and there's a lot more about what I'm going to say that I'm going to say now. I have 3 chapters towards the end of the book. They're called Just a Coincidence, ? Just a Coincidence 2, ? Just a Coincidence 3, in which I simply detail the extremists, the ultra-Zionist extremists who were involved before, during, and after 9/11. And it is breathtaking. And before I start, let me say this. The Jewish population of the world is 0.2%. 0.2%. And if you take a mean figure, because they, depending on how you define what a Jewish person is, the mean figure, there's about 16 million in a world of 7.7 billion. And the people I'm identifying within that community who are not Jewish, they hate Jews, they're Sabbatean Frankists and ultra-Zionists who, not all of them will know about the cult, but they've bought the Israel right or wrong belief system. The people I'm naming are a tiny, tiny number within that 0.2% and within that 16 million.
Thousands?
At most, at the core. So let's have a look.
It can change the way you live. It can take away everything you have. It can destroy your family and make your children's future uncertain. It has hurt more, damaged more, killed more than anything mankind has ever known. What is it? It's the B'nai Brith, enlightening America and the world.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
What was Kennedy's the occasion of his attack? The B'nai Brith. Oh, Christ.
It is extremely dangerous what I'm embarking upon, simply because so many people who have attempted to reveal this history previously have been killed in the process of doing it. I have no fear, and I will finish what I start, or someone will, because it needs to be done. Tonight I begin to narrate to you a special report of the Executive Intelligence Review entitled The Ugly Truth about the ADL. Now I want you to understand something. I am not talking about Jews. I am talking about a branch of the Illuminati, the control structure that is bringing one world government into fruition, destroying the sovereignty of nations, and many, many other things. As you will see, ladies and gentlemen, the ADL does not represent the Jewish people, but instead is using them and is manipulating them so that they innocently, as many of you have done throughout your life innocently, are helping to bring about the destruction of the sovereignty of individual nations, the destruction of individual creator-endowed, constitutionally guaranteed rights, and the formation of a one-world, totalitarian, socialist government. I want it clearly understood that the hour of the time has stated on many, many occasions that we oppose racism of any kind, in any form, by anyone. What you're going to discover is that the ADL, while calling many, many people anti-Semitic, are themselves one of the greatest racist groups that has ever existed upon the face of this earth. On April 14th, 1865, the day President Abraham Lincoln was shot, will live forever, ladies and gentlemen, as a day of infamy for American patriots and lovers of freedom all over the world. But for the leadership of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and the Order of B'nai Brith and its 20th century secret police arm, the Anti-Defamation League, April 14th, 1865, is a day that will be long remembered for a very different reason. The B'nai Brith, a pivotal player in the British Freemasonic plot to destroy the Union, was implicated in Lincoln's assassination, something that you've never been taught. That fact does not square very well with its long cultivated but totally unwarranted reputation as a Jewish social service organization and a champion of civil rights. For that reason, B'nai Brith and the ADL have gone to great lengths, ladies and gentlemen, to bury that history and much, much more. Simon Wolfe, 1835 to 1923, was the Washington, D.C. lawyer for the Order of B'nai Brith during the entire period of the United States Civil War. He would later head the International Order of B'nai Brith for many years. In 1862, Wolfe was arrested by Lafayette C. Baker, the chief of detectives for the city of Washington, D.C., and later Lincoln's chief of the United States Secret Service, on charges that Wolfe was involved in spying and blockade running on behalf of the Confederacy. Baker arrested Wolfe, who was the attorney representing a number of Jews accused of spying for the South, on the grounds that he was part of a conspiratorial organization working on behalf of the secessionist cause behind the lines in the nation's capital. The conspiratorial organization named by Baker was the B'nai Brith. Both Baker and United States General Ulysses S. Grant targeted the Order of B'nai Brith as a Confederate spy agency. Upon taking command of the Western Front in 1862, General Grant issued Order Number 11, which expelled all Jews from the military district within 24 hours of its implementation. U.S. Grant was no anti-Semite, ladies and gentlemen. He was reacting to the activities of B'nai Brith and leading Confederates like Judah P. Benjamin. Lincoln, however, cognizant of the need to avoid blanket attacks against religious or ethnic groups, rescinded the order, which was the proper thing to do, for all Jews are not members of B'nai Brith, and Brith was not solely at guilt. The Civil War was actually engineered and brought about by British intelligence through their arm of the Illuminati in the United States, headed by Albert Pike, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, whose headquarters at that time was in Charleston, South Carolina. In 1987, B'nai Brith authorized biography of Simon Wolf by Esther L. Panitz offered the following highly suggestive, albeit incomplete, description of Wolf's personal relationship with President Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth. Now bear in mind, folks, that this biography, written on the basis of B'nai Brith's archives, written on the basis of B'nai Brith's own archives, paints Wolf in the most favorable of lights. The mere fact that the author had to include Wolf's links to Booth and Wolf's earlier arrest as an alleged Confederate spy and blockade runner implies that the actual story is far uglier. I quote from the history of the B'nai Brith. Wolf's concern for culture first expressed itself in the formation of a private club devoted to the arts and humanities and frequented by young men avid for learning. Were pride and ambition his only motives in seeking the intellectual life? Clearly, Wolf hoped that if he and his friends would devote themselves to the pursuit of learning, they would deflect the prejudicial statements of their Christian neighbors. Wolf was upset that terms such as money changers, cotton traders, and clothes dealers had become words of reproach. Locally, the group's theatrical productions received a good press. Wolf, who would often play the ghost in Hamlet or Shylock in The Merchant of Venice, bore an uncanny resemblance to John Wilkes Booth, Lincoln's assassin. Earlier in Cleveland, Booth had joined Wolf and Piaxoto in dramatic performances. Years afterward, Wolf remembered that he had met Booth once again at the Willard Hotel on the morning of the day Lincoln was shot. There at the bar, Booth explained that Senator John P. Hale's daughter had just rejected his marriage proposal. Wolf attributed Lincoln's murder to this personal tragedy in Booth's own life. Wolf also recalled that once he sat for a picture entitled, quote, "The Assassination of President Lincoln," end quote. In his own book, ladies and gentlemen, entitled Presidents I Have Known, Wolf says that he and his longtime acquaintance John Wilkes Booth did some drinking together at the Willard Hotel on the day Booth shot Lincoln. Wolf's and a second leading B'nai Brith figure, Benjamin Piaxoto's dealings with John Wilkes Booth were hardly cultural. Nor could Wolf have possibly believed that Abraham Lincoln was killed because of John Wilkes Booth's unrequited love affair. Even John Hinckley, the would-be assassin of President Ronald Reagan, was declared insane when he tried to peddle the line that he had tried to kill Ronald Reagan due to an unfulfilled fantasy love affair with actress Jodie Foster. To understand the circumstances under which B'nai Brith's Washington, D.C. leader and one of its founding members were circumstantially tied to the Lincoln assassination conspiracy and explicitly linked to the secessionist insurrection against the Union, it is necessary to look briefly at the circumstances under which the Order of B'nai Brith was founded in 1843. Following the American Revolution, the British monarchy and its East India Company colonist apparatus never for a moment abandoned their commitment to reconquer the lost colonies in North America. Although the military effort at reconquest in the War of 1812 failed, other efforts to seed the United States with British agents, some drawn from the ranks of anti-Republican Tories who were permitted to retain their citizenship and property in America under the terms of the Treaty of Paris of 1783, were more successful. In 1801, the Tory faction of United States Freemasonry, the grouping of Freemasons who had sided with England during the American Revolution, opened up shop as the Grand Council of the Princes of Jerusalem, of the Mother Supreme Council, of the Knights Commander, of the House of the Temple of Solomon, of the 33rd degree, of the ancient and accepted order of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in the United States. This United States-based British Freemasonic Lodge was chartered in Charleston, South Carolina. The members of this British-led secret society would direct the Confederate secessionist insurrection a half-century later, and other Scottish Rite members would be among the founders of the B'nai Brith. They, too, would be leading Confederates. Apart from the esoteric mission of spreading an explicitly anti-Christian form of Roman pagan worship and occultism among the early generations of American citizens, the Charleston Lodge also sought to build up a network of pro-British merchants, spies, and politicians in both the North and the South, who would one day play a pivotal role in the reconquest. Many of these early Masons became wealthy through their business dealings with the British East India Company and the Dutch West India Company in both the cotton and the slave trade. Among the founding members of the Charleston Scottish Rite Lodge were many prominent Jews, including Isaac de Costa, Moses Cohen, Isreal de Liban, Dr. Isaac Held, Moses Levy, and Moses Piexoto. Many of these men, ladies and gentlemen, were Sephardic Jews from North Africa or from Spain, who had originally settled in the Caribbean and engaged in the early slave trade. These Jewish Masons set up their organizations, which also maintained active liaison to Great Britain's powerful Jewish community. The Hebrew Orphan Aid Society was one such nominally benign group that would produce one of the most rabid secessionist leaders, Judah P. Benjamin. Although today, any reports of the Freemasonic roots and structure of B'nai Brith are usually greeted with a torrent of allegations of anti-Semitism, back in the formative years, B'nai Brith's own magazine, The Menorah, offered the following information about the founders of the group, and listen to this very carefully. Quote, "Their reunions were frequent, and several of them being members of existing benevolent societies, especially the Order of Freemasons and Oddfellows, they finally concluded that a somewhat similar organization, but based upon the Jewish idea, would best obtain their object. The Jewish religion has many observances and customs corresponding to the secret societies known to us. The synagogue, for instance, might be compared to a lodge room. It used to be open twice a day. For a Jew desiring to find a friend, they had but to go there and make themselves known by a certain sign and token. The sign consisted of a grip with a full hand and the magical word Shalom Aleichem. The mezuzah on the doorpost was the countersign, Shema Israel, Hear, O Israel, was the password." End quote. Indeed, to this day, all local chapters of the B'nai Brith are referred to as lodges, a practice borrowed whole cloth from the Scottish Rite. When Moses saw some Jews of this B'nai Brith type who tried to make their religion into a pagan secret society, he took the calf which they had made and burned it in the fire and ground it into powder. And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, "O this people have sinned a great sin, and made them gods of gold." The majority of Jews in America during the first generations following independence were opposed to the idea of a Jewish Freemasonic secret society. Most Jews are ordinary people like all of you listening, and don't know anything any more about what's happening in the world than you do. They are lied to just like you are lied to. They are deceived just like you are deceived, and they are easily manipulated because throughout the history of the world, they have been chosen as the scapegoat, as the enemy. And because of that, they can be easily led by organizations such as B'nai Brith and the Anti-Defamation League. Israel Joseph Benjamin, a noted European Jew, in his memoirs 3 Years in America, 1859 to 62, wrote of the B'nai Brith that, quote, "This is a secret society like the Freemasons with passwords and the like, and was quite a new phenomenon for me. Still, I think the existence of such a society not at all necessary, end quote. He was right, ladies and gentlemen. The secret agenda of the B'nai Brith, like that of the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite, was to destroy the Union and pave the way for reconquest. The ultimate goal, one world, totalitarian, socialist government. You see, B'nai Brith is not the synagogue. B'nai Brith is not Jews. B'nai Brith is not Judaism. B'nai Brith is just another organ under a different name of the ages-old Illuminati, who practiced the ancient mystery religion of Babylon in secret. They call themselves the Great White Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of Man, the Illumined Ones. And if you've listened to our series on Mystery Babylon, you know the rest. Two leading B'nai Brith allied figures would serve as exemplars of the strategy for permanently dividing the Union. One was Judah P. Benjamin and the other August Belmont. Benjamin, who lived from 1811 to 1884, was born in the British West Indies to Sephardic Jewish parents who moved to Charleston, South Carolina in 1827. He was inducted into the Charleston Hebrew Orphan Aid Society, one of the precursors of the B'nai Brith. After attending Yale College in New Haven, Connecticut, he was forced to drop out under a cloud of scandal. Benjamin surfaced in New Orleans, where he quickly won the patronage of John Slidell. Slidell, a United States senator who would later play a pivotal role in the Confederacy, and sponsored the career of August Belmont, who married Slidell's daughter. With Slidell's assistance, Benjamin became a prominent attorney, even serving for a period of time in the United States Attorney for New Orleans. Benjamin gained notoriety for covering up the growing terrorist activities of the Scottish Rite-sponsored Knights of the Golden Circle, while serving as the local federal prosecutor. In 1852, Benjamin was elected United States Senator, a post he retained until the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861, when he resigned to serve the Confederacy. Benjamin was the first Confederate Attorney General. He later served as Secretary of War and Secretary of State, ultimately running the Confederate Secret Service on behalf of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. And as the Mossad does today, he used innocent Jews in the North who were opposed to the dissolution of the Union to furnish information to the intelligence arm of the Confederacy. Judah Benjamin escaped to England following the defeat of the Confederate secessionist plot. It was Benjamin's Confederate Secret Service which organized and supervised such figures in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln as John Wilkes Booth and his accomplice John Surratt. Benjamin was charged with sedition for the Lincoln assassination, although he was never brought to trial due to his protectus status in England. With the help of a leading Rothschild political asset in England, Baron Pollock, Benjamin continued his legal career in London. He never abandoned his commitment to subvert and destroy the American Republic. However, as a wealthy lawyer for the British merchant oligarchs, Judah Benjamin collaborated with other exiled Confederate and Masonic strategists in England, such as James D. Bullock and Robert Toombs. Benjamin's continuing preoccupation with defeating Reconstruction is indicated in letters he wrote back to the United States with complaints such as these. Quote, "I have always looked with the utmost dread and distrust on the experiment of emancipation so suddenly enforced on the South by the event of the war. God knows how it will all end," end quote. And then he went on to say, quote, "The South is kept crushed under Negro rule. I can never consent to go to New Orleans and break my heart witnessing the rule of Negroes and carpetbaggers. Nothing is so abhorrent to me as radicalism which seeks to elevate the populace into the governing class," end quote. And that indeed is the sympathy of all of those who call themselves illumined. You see, we are all nothing but cattle, stupid animals, and they are the only ones who have truly mature minds, and thus are the only ones with the right to rule. The Ku Klux Klan, none of you were ever taught this, but it's the truth. The Ku Klux Klan, KKK, was founded in Tennessee in the late 1860s by the Southern Scottish Rite leadership under Albert Pike. The KKK drew its membership from the pre-Civil War Knights of the Golden Circle. Judah P. Benjamin's early role in sponsoring and protecting both the Knights of the Golden Circle and the Ku Klux Klan offers a crucial insight into the B'nai Brith. ADL's later role in fostering the revival of the KKK in the post-World War II period. We shall return to that sordid tale, ladies and gentlemen, later in this series of broadcasts. Another Rothschild and B'nai Brith ally who enjoyed the political patronage of Confederate John Slidell, August Belmont, was Judah Benjamin's northern counterpart, a private secretary to the British House of Rothschild who arrived in New York City from London in 1837. Belmont rose to the chairmanship of the Democratic Party, a position he held for 20 years. Belmont was a leading advocate of free trade and states' rights, both cornerstones of the British Reconquest scheme. Prior to his emergence as a leading figure in the National Democratic Party, Belmont worked closely with the Charleston, South Carolina B'nai Brith in fomenting radicalism among Americans' youth. The effort was in this case run directly by the Mother Lodge of the Scottish Rite in England, then under the command of Britain's Prime Minister, Lord Palmerston. At Belmont's behest, Charleston's B'nai Brith leader, Edwin de Leon, wrote a pamphlet in the early 1850s entitled The Position and Duties of Young American. De Leon, whose family were slave traders, B'nai Brith founders, and later leading Confederates, peddled free trade and openly advocated a strong Anglo-American alliance. While by today's standards the appeal for a strong Anglo-American alliance may seem palatable to some, back in the middle of the 19th century, this was borderline treason. Ladies and gentlemen, the phone is ringing off the wall as the fanatics try to get through to deny this. It is the truth. The original research was done by the Executive Intelligence Review. CAGI has duplicated the research down to the T to make sure that this material is true. And it is absolutely 100% legitimate and historical truth from beginning to end. And that's why the ADL and B'nai Brith has never sued the Executive Intelligence Review over this report. Belmont's Young America members were among the draft rioters and radical abolitionists who disrupted Lincoln's Union war mobilization to the benefit of the Confederacy and England. During the early phase of the Civil War, England tried repeatedly to intervene into the conflict with ceasefire plans that would have ensured the permanent dissolution of the Union. During the Civil War itself, while the majority of American Jews sided with the North, make sure you understand this, folks, so you know that this is not a racist or anti-Semitic program or report. The majority of American Jews sided with the North and fought valiantly to preserve the Union. The B'nai Brith was predominantly pro-Confederate. Even in New York City, the lodges preached secession. The Baltimore Hebrew congregation, founded by Dutch Jews who made their money in the slave trade, heard sermons by Rabbi Morris Raphael and the following. And he said this, quote, "Who can blame our brethren of the South for their being inclined to succeed from a society under whose government their ends cannot be attained, and whose union is kept together by heavy iron ties of violence and arbitrary force? Who can blame our brethren of the South for succeeding from a society whose government cannot and will not protect property rights and privileges of a great portion of the Union?" End quote. Following the Civil War and the assassination of President Lincoln, many of the Jewish slave and cotton traders from the South, typified by the Lehman Brothers, moved to New York City and became prominent in Wall Street banking and stock brokerages. With the defeat of President Lincoln's Reconstruction program following his assassination, President Andrew Johnson pardoned the Scottish Rite insurrectionists. Now listen to this closely. President Andrew Johnson pardoned the Scottish Rite insurrectionists, including General Albert Pike, and accepted a rank of 32nd degree in the Southern jurisdiction Freemasons. That was his reward. Suspected Lincoln assassination plotter Simon Wolfe was also absolved of any criminal culpability for his wartime activities. Only non-Freemasons and non-B'nai Brith were prosecuted for the crimes they committed during the Civil War. The legacy of British Freemasonic treachery against the Union survived intact, including the B'nai Brith. Although the slave trade nominally was banned in the United States as a result of Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, a new form of slavery had already been launched by the British East India Company and its Scottish Rite directors, including the same Lord Palmerston who had played so pivotal a role in the secessionist insurrection. The new form of slavery was drugs, opium. Henry Carey, one of the architects of Abraham Lincoln's Reconstruction program and a leading proponent of the American system of political economy, warned about Britain's opium war against China and India in his 1853 book, The Slave Trade, Domestic and Foreign. Get the book and read it. He described the trade in, quote, that pernicious drug opium, end quote, as, quote, one of perfect free trade, end quote. Defeated in the secessionist insurrectionist plot, Britain and its fifth column of agents in both the North and the South would eventually regroup around a strategy for running an opium war against the United States. As the reader will learn in later chapters, the B'nai Brith and its Anti-Defamation League's secret lodge played a central role in the drugging of America.
Like a phoenix from the ashes of Sherman's march to the sea, Atlanta sprung forth as the gateway to the New South, attracting a diverse array of businesses and workers to Georgia's capital. One of these workers was former farm girl, 13-year-old Mary Fagan, who had recently been laid off at the National Pencil Company, then managed by 29-year-old Superintendent Leo Frank, a man of German Jewish descent who grew up in New York, eventually graduating from Cornell University, and traveled throughout Europe to learn the ways of business. Though he journeyed south only a few years prior to implement his European lessons, Frank made fast friends within his community, becoming president of the Atlanta chapter of B'nai Brith, which is much like a Masonic society but strictly for Jewish folks that was created in New York after the American Revolution. On Saturday, April 26, 1913, on the day of what was once celebrated as Confederate Memorial Day, little Mary Fagan entered the office of her boss, Leo Frank, to collect her pay of $1.20. Frank would be the last known person to see Mary alive. The next day, in the wee hours of morning, Newt Lee, the night watchman, discovered a horrible scene in the basement of the factory, where Mary's brutally beaten body was left atop of a flurry of pencil shavings, with a cord cinched around her neck, her autopsy later revealing she'd been raped. And beside her corpse were 2 notes describing her murderer, a long, tall black man called the Night Witch, written through Mary's perspective, as though she jotted it down during her final moments. The black night watchman who discovered Mary's body was immediately brought into the police station as a suspect, and police wasted no time in attempting to get a confession out of him, even going as far as firing off a gun next to his head during the interrogation. But that confession never came. More suspects were arrested as pressure mounted to find Mary's killer, but eventually only 2 suspects remained. The first was Jim Conley, the pencil factory's black janitor, who held the lowest status job at the factory but was paid 50% more than white child laborers, and held special privilege of never having to punch the clock as granted by Frank, and was seen washing red stains out of his shirt while at the factory, which police later determined to be rust. And the second suspect was Leo Frank, the last person to admit seeing Mary alive. Frank quickly hired the best defense team money could buy to prove his innocence in the murder trial that made front-page headlines that entire summer. In the courtroom and beyond, lies were told, stories rehashed, true character revealed, and bribes offered. The case began to heat up after Conley admitted that he wasn't illiterate like he originally claimed. And in fact, he swore that Leo Frank paid him to write the murder notes, framing Conley's entire involvement as an accomplice in the murder of Mary Fagan, with Leo Frank as the main suspect. Refusing to be cross-examined unlike the other suspects, Frank's story began to unravel as his accounts of what occurred after Mary left his office started to change with each recollection. Originally, Frank swore that he stayed in his office following Mary's departure after receiving her pay envelope. But later, Frank stated he might have taken an unconscious bathroom break that would have placed him walking past the metal room, the site where Mary was believed to have been murdered and at the suspected time when the attack occurred. Another young worker was called to the witness stand, claiming that she had gone to Frank's office right after Mary left, and Frank wasn't there. She even waited around for a bit, but concluded that Frank had gone home for the day. The character witnesses included a string of female employees who all had the same thing to say about Frank. He was a touchy, leery pervert with a penchant for young girls. So after a drawn-out trial that garnered immense public attention, and claims from the prosecution that alleged bribery and witness tampering from Frank's legal team, the grand jury reached a unanimous verdict. A grand jury which, by the way, included Jewish members. They'd all decided that Leo Frank was guilty. After being convicted of murder, the judge sentenced Frank to death by hanging, which was set to be carried out that October, but after Frank's legal team attempted several failed appeals all the way up to the federal level, attorney and Georgia Governor Slayton eventually had Frank's sentence reduced to life in prison. The public response was one of anger, as they believed the justice system had failed the real victim, Mary Fagan, because of under-the-table deals and conflicts of interest, given that Governor Slayton was a partner at the law firm of Frank's defense. On August 16, 1915, a group of about 25 men who called themselves the Knights of Mary Fagan kidnapped Frank from prison and lynched him in Marietta, Georgia, his body facing the direction of the Fagan residence. Though they described themselves as a benevolent organization, by the time Mary Fagan's corpse was 6 feet under Georgia clay, B'nai Brith had already been publicly accused of espionage during the Civil War and implicated in the assassination of President Lincoln, with the goal of subverting and fragmenting America so that it could once again fall under the British crown, as documented by both Gentile and Jewish scholars alike. During the Civil War, agents of B'nai Brith even worked in cahoots with Confederate General and Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite's Southern Jurisdiction, the infamous Freemason known as Albert Pike. It was reported that after Leo Frank was found guilty and convicted of murder, he was once again re-elected as president of B'nai Brith's Atlanta chapter, whose members were adamant in perpetuating the narrative that Frank's fate relied heavily on Conley's testimony, the testimony of a proven liar and second-class citizen in the post-Civil War South. And B'nai Brith even went as far as inscribing in stone that everyone in the courtroom during that sweltering southern summer, aside from Frank and his defense team, was either bribed, threatened, or fell under one all-encompassing term, an anti-Semite. The same year, the Federal Reserve System was created and Americans began paying federal income tax. Leo Frank was convicted of murder, and as a result, B'nai Brith created the Anti-Defamation League, what would serve as the public relations arm of their benevolent organization, with its original mission statement to stop, by appeals to reason and conscience, and if necessary, by appeals to law, the defamation of the Jewish people. As the years watered down the public awareness of the Leo Frank trial, the ADL ramped up their campaign to paint Frank as an innocent man and victim of anti-Semitism. Their efforts stretched across various platforms, publications, docu-series, college curriculums, and music theater productions. One retelling of Frank's story portrayed 13-year-old Mary Fagan as a temptress who all but enjoyed being sexually abused by older men. The ADL highlighted racial tensions in the South during that time, but conveniently left out crucial evidence in key witness accounts that ultimately resulted in Frank's conviction. Even in her last will and testament, Frank's Jewish wife stated that she didn't want to be buried next to him. Was she also practicing anti-Semitism? The ADL has never been shy about their objective. unless they could obtain an official pardon for Leo Frank from the United States legal system. It very much appeared that the organization was created to protect a pedophile murderer who managed a sweatshop full of children. In 1982, it seemed like the ADL would get exactly what they wanted when Alonzo Mann, in his old age, came forward with a statement. He'd lied in 1913 during his sworn testimony. He corrected the record, saying that on April 26, 1913, when he was a 14-year-old office boy at the National Pencil Company, he witnessed Jim Conley carrying the body of Mary Fagan. And when Conley realized he'd been caught, he threatened Mann's life, saying that if he told anyone, he'd kill him. So 67 years after Frank was lynched, Mann came clean, which started the process of the ADL petitioning for a pardon. But what the ADL considered a bombshell only confirmed Conley's testimony. He was an accomplice to the murder. An appeal to tribalism would have you believe that an innocent man was lynched for a crime he didn't commit because of anti-Semitism. An appeal to common sense leads you in a different direction. Mary Fagan obviously didn't write her own murder notes, so if Jim Conley was really the one guilty of homicide, then why would he implicate himself in the notes? Isn't it more logical to consider that Conley was probably paid by the real murderer to write those notes in the aftermath of Mary's death, assuring Conley that the physical description of a long, tall black night witch would fit the physical description of Newt Lee, who they both knew would be the one to discover Mary's body the following morning. Pair that common sense explanation with the forensic and circumstantial evidence, character witnesses, and the ever-changing personal testimony that eventually planted Leo Frank at the scene of the crime at the time of Mary's death, and that's how a unanimous guilty verdict was reached.
Modern America first saw light on a Hollywood screen. It was largely the product of 6 movie studios established in the 1920s and run for over 30 years by a group of Jewish immigrants. They had strikingly similar backgrounds.
All races and religions, that's America to me.
All of these men who founded Hollywood were born within a 500-mile radius of one another. And all of them wound up roughly within 15 miles of one another in Los Angeles. One could say that the American dream was really born in Eastern Europe.
Well, here we are. This is the Warner Studio.
Gee, I've never been so thrilled in all my life.
Harry Warner, who with 3 of his brothers brought sound to the motion picture, was born in Poland.
Comes Jack Warner, youngest of the Warner clan, and then the senior member of the film-famed brothers.
Also from Poland was Samuel Goldwyn, born Goldfish. Although Goldwyn never ran a major studio, he was perhaps the biggest and best known of the independent Hollywood producers. Universal founder Carl Laemmle came from a small town in Germany. Louis B. Mayer, who gave us the glory years of the MGM studio, was born in a Russian Jewish village. William Fox and Paramount's Adolf Zucker were both born in Hungary. Fox's studio merged with 20th Century Pictures to form 20th Century Fox.
David Walk Griffith was born in 1875 and died in 1948. He was an American film director. Considered one of the most influential figures in the history of motion picture, he pioneered many aspects of film editing and expanded the art of the narrative film. Griffith is known to modern audiences primarily for directing the film Birth of a Nation. The film led to riots in several major cities all over the United States. Griffith made his next film, Intolerance, as an answer to critics who he felt had unfairly maligned his work.
The original The Birth of a Nation, a silent movie, came out in 1915. It's an adaptation of the Thomas Dixon Jr. novel, The Klansman, an historical romance of the Ku Klux Klan, about the relationship between two families in the American Civil War and Reconstruction era. It was directed by D.W. Griffith, one of the best-known filmmakers of the period, often referred to as the father of film technique. Griffith produced and directed the first movie ever made in Hollywood, called In Old California, and went on to found United Artists in 1920, alongside Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and Charlie Chaplin, who called Griffith the teacher of us all.
D.W. Griffith, basically regarded as one of the most prolific and innovative filmmakers of all time, in 1915 created a film that was the most racist film, not only of its time, but to date, outside of Goebbels' films against the Poles in World War II. When this film made it to the theaters, KKK's enrollment, rose to over 4 million. At the end of such screenings, they would take to the streets and they would lynch the black people that they saw.
However, in 1862, General Ulysses S. Grant expelled all Jews from his war zone on flimsy accusations of war profiteering, despite the fact that Grant's own father worked with Jewish businessmen. Luckily, Lincoln interceded, saying he did not like to hear a class or nationality condemned on account of a few sinners. Grant would later disavow the order and become the first president to attend the dedication of a synagogue.
I wrote the Jewish Confederates because when I wrote a book about Charleston, I was really surprised that the Jewish community was so ardent for the Confederacy. You really don't associate the Jews with the Confederacy. But in fact, the truth is hundreds of thousands of Jews, well, not hundreds of thousands, but 150,000 Jews came to America in the 1840s. And they were German, they spoke German, they were mostly immigrants. And 25,000 came to the South. Not a lot, very small number of people, but they were mostly in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Richmond. They were merchants, they were peddlers, they worked in saloons. They really were not well-to-do people. They were new immigrants. And they were, I think, surprised by the fact that they were so accepted, that people allowed them to conduct business, they could vote, they were treated as equals. They could open their houses of worship. And so, when the war came, they were just like regular Southerners. I think the story is really a non-story. In other words, they were here, they got caught up in the excitement of secession, all the reasons why Southerners went to war, and they enlisted and they fought. And so, you find them everywhere. You find them in the infantry, you find them in even a few in the cavalry, you find them in the artillery. No, but you find them spread out just like, really the whole story is they were just like everyone else. But they were, for the most part, immigrants. They did, a lot of them speak German. And so they tended to associate with each other, with other German speakers. But they really tried to assimilate. You find the Irish, for example, had their own brigades and regiments. The Germans did too, but the Jews really tried to spread out and fit in. And so, they felt they were fighting for their country, for their state. They went to war for the same reasons other white Southerners went to war, but they also went to war for a special reason. Jews were thought of as people who were not loyal to the country they lived in. There was discrimination, there was prejudice, and they wanted to show that they would fight, and they would stand up and be counted as citizens and as men. And while it's not politically correct today to be identified with the Confederacy, the truth is these men were fighting for reasons that people generally fight out of patriotism, loyalty, a sense of duty. And so they did fight. Some of them even achieved a high rank. On the cover of my book is Adolph Proskow, who's a colonel of the Alabama 12th. So they were accepted generally by the Confederates. And I think this is a story that wasn't told and that people find a little hard to believe. When my book came out, the New York Magazine said, what were they thinking? And but what they were thinking just like other white Southerners, whether good, bad, or however you feel about it, that's what they did.
When we look at a file and we find evidence that they were Jewish, that's a great thing. And it looks like this is the certificate of the decease of Moses Schloss. And in this case, it says Palmer Vault at Mount Sinai. And Jewish cemeteries are often called Mount Sinai, so that gives us a good clue. Nothing says proof of Jewish like a marriage certificate written in Hebrew. And for descendants, this is going to be really great to look and see their ancestors' marriage certificate. If we can get families and descendants involved to share the material that they have, the Civl Foundation will be in a position to help them care for their objects. Most people don't have the ability to care for these documents themselves, and if they knew that there was a place that it could be, included with other documents and materials that spoke to this time and these people.
One of the leading figures of our time is dead. Bernard Baruch, whose favorite office in later years was a park bench, was a quiet philanthropist who gave away the millions he accumulated as a financier and Wall Street broker.
Bernard Baruch was a giant of the first half of the 20th century. Born in 1870 in Camden, South Carolina, Bernard Baruch was one of 4 sons of Simon Baruch, a Jewish German immigrant, and Isabel Wolf Baruch. Isabel was from a wealthy Jewish family who had been living in South Carolina since the 17th century.
By the year 1800, shortly after the American Revolution, Charleston, South Carolina had the largest population of Jews of anywhere in North America.
Simon Baruch studied medicine at the South Carolina Medical College in Charleston and the Medical College of Virginia. He finished his studies a year after the start of the Civil War and enlisted as a Confederate Army surgeon. In 1880, the Baruchs moved from South Carolina to New York City. There, Bernard Baruch graduated from the College of the City of New York. As an alumnus, he made a substantial gift to his alma mater, and eventually it came to be called Baruch College.
The Baruchs. The power of this family was based on business and politics. Bernard Baruch was the patriarch who began the history of the family. He was a financier, shareholder, statesman, American political advisor of Jewish origin, broker, and partner of A.A. Houseman & Company. With his income and commissions, he bought a position in the New York Stock Exchange for the value of $434,000. By age 30, he had already amassed a great fortune by speculating in the sugar market. In 1903, Baruch had his own brokerage firm, and because he chose not to join any financial house, he earned the reputation of the Lone Wolf of Wall Street and became one of the most recognized financiers. After his success in business, he excelled in the field of politics. He advised U.S. Presidents Woodrow Wilson and Franklin D. Roosevelt on economic matters. It is also known that he was a close friend of Sir Winston Churchill. Baruch College of the City University of New York and Saratoga Racecourse Bernard Baruch Handicap were named in his honor. When dying, his properties were under the administration of his wife Annie and their children Belle, Renee, and Bernard Baruch Jr. The Pritzker. If you've ever stayed at a luxury hotel or an elegant 5-star resort, you may have been inside the Pritzker domains. This family of Jewish immigrants from Ukraine moved from Kiev to Chicago in 1881. The Pritzkers owned the Hyatt Corporation, a multinational with luxury hotels and resorts, which would total 777 establishments in 54 countries. The family owns the A.N. Pritzker School, which is focused on fine arts and performing arts, as well as its own architecture prize. This award, which bears the name of the family, seeks to encourage and stimulate greater public awareness and inspire more creativity. The Pritzkers have also participated in the Superior Bank of Chicago, the TransUnion Credit Agency, the Braniff Airlines, McCall's Magazine, and the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. His influence on politics was noted in 2016 as they were one of the biggest contributors to the Clinton campaign. They have also been known for their support of educational, scientific, medical, and cultural activities.
Star of David, where does that symbol come from?
It's never written explicitly in the Bible itself.
Is it in the Talmud? Perhaps. Is there a passage in the Bible about that or no?
No.
Okay. So you're not really sure exactly where that comes from?
No. You got me.
Is it nobody knows,
Yeah,
huh?
I don't know. I'm not, yeah.
Because I know it's called the Star of David.
Yeah.
Does it have anything to do with David?
No, I don't think so. There must be somewhere. I do not remember exactly what the association was.
Okay.
You get back to the Masonic fraternity of Freemasonry.
Yeah.
Their great symbol is G. You'll look at the star on the compass, which is a stylized Star of David. In fact, they have the entire Star of David in many Masonic temples. Why is that? Masonry is a study of the Kabbalah. Albert Pike said in his book, Morals and Dogma, that the Kabbalah is the very basis. Without the Kabbalah, we would not have the 33 rituals of the Masonic Lodge. But the god they worship, the great architect, is Moloch, God, star god, called Remphan or Kiyun. All these were names for Moloch.
Ye took up the tabernacle of Moloch, and the star of your god Remphan, figures which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. And the star of your god Remphan, but ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, and Chayun your images, the star of your god which ye made to yourselves, and Chayun your images, the star of your god,
and Chayun your images, the star of your god, and Chayun your images, the star of your god.
And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. They are not Jews, and their claiming to be Jews is blasphemy. But you claim to have a covenant relationship with the God of righteousness. I say you're a so-called Jew. You are Satan masquerading as a covenanted people of God. You must be exposed regardless to the consequences. The synagogue of Satan is not just composed of so-called Jews. It's composed of people of like minds that are under their influence.
Unique about the monument honoring Albert Pike. The general is holding a book in his hand. It's called Morals and Dogma. The book, written by Pike, is considered to be the Bible of the Scottish Rite Freemasons. Only those men who obtained the highest degree in Masonry were awarded this secret book. In Morals and Dogma, General Pike revealed the mysterious origins of the Freemasons, and he revealed a tightly guarded secret concerning the source of all wisdom in all religions. What follows are the actual quotes found inside the book, in the hand of Brigadier General Albert Pike, in a monument that stands in Washington, D.C., 13 blocks from the White House. Masonry is a search after light. That search leads us directly back to the Kabbalah. All Masonic associations owe Kabbalah their secrets and their symbols. One is filled with admiration on penetrating into the sanctuary of the Kabbalah, at seeing a doctrine so logical, so simple, and at the same time, so absolute. The Zohar, the key of the holy books, opens up all the depths and lights, all of the obscurities of the ancient mythologies and of the sciences. All religions have issued from Kabbalah and returned to it. Regarding the true origins of Christianity, Pike wrote, Paul studied Kabbalah at the feet of Gamaliel, the rabbi. Here is the origin of the Trinity, of the Father, the Mother, or Holy Spirit, and the Son. Christ himself recognized it as a truth that all Scripture had an inner and outer meaning. on the hidden meaning of the rose. The mystical meanings of the rose as a symbol are to be looked for in the Kabbalistic commentaries. On the mystery of revelation on Mount Sinai, the primary tradition of the single revelation has been preserved under the name of the Kabbalah. On the origins of the wisdom of Pythagoras, Pythagoras visited all the sanctuaries of the world. He went into Judea, where he procured himself to be circumcised, that he might be admitted to the secrets of the Kabbalah, which the prophets Ezekiel and Daniel communicated to him. The purpose of the Templars, according to Pike, was to acquire enough wealth and power to establish Kabbalah throughout the world. In the headquarters of the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite in Washington, D.C., there's a bronze bust of Brigadier General Albert Pike. Above it is a quote from General Pike, which conveys the essence of Kabbalistic teachings. What we have done for ourselves alone dies with us. What we have done for others and the world remains and is immortal.
The god Baphomet. This is the god that the Templars were supposed to have been worshiping when they came back from the Crusades, and the Pope and Philip le Bel condemned Jacques de Molay, who was the head of the Templars at that point in time, and they scattered to Portugal and Scotland. Of course, resurfaced later as the organization of Freemasonry. But again, this is the god of Freemasonry. Now, how would you like to be the wife of a Mason and suddenly come to realize what your husband is into? And he has taken an oath, hasn't he? He's not going to tell you what he's into. Now, what I like to do when I can, I like to read the Occult Zone books. And I have a book here called The Evolution of Freemasonry, written by a Freemason, published by McCoy Publishing Company, which is a Masonic publishing company. Some of you will really enjoy this. I just toss it in here because I thought it was interesting. It's in this book on page 89. There's a picture of Martin Luther, and it says, Martin Luther opened the way for the future development of Freemasonry. In the book, 10,000 Freemasons, 10,000 Famous Freemasons, written by a Freemason, there is an individual who was a cohort of Martin Luther who was himself a Freemason. And so, was Luther himself a Mason? I don't know.
The white man pays Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And following the ignorant Negro preachers, we have thought that it was godlike to turn the other cheek to the brute that was brutalizing us. And every other person on this earth has God-given rights, natural rights, civil rights, any kind of rights that you can think of. When it comes to defending himself, black people should have the right to defend ourselves also.
White Nazi, not in Germany, right here in New York City, up there burning cross, had a carload of guns ready to come at you like they came at the Jews over in Germany. And when they caught those Nazis, they found that one of them was a Jew. And that Jew running around here talking about Nazis, and some of them are nothing but Nazis themselves. You didn't hear them blow that up in the newspaper, did you? No, they tried to quiet it down. Why, when you find Jews who are Nazis, you really found something. In fact, I think you can find a whole lot of them who are Nazis. Always running around here trying to make you get sympathetic for them. And some of them blue-eyed Jews are going to walk away from here and say that I'm saying something anti-Semitic, anti-hell.
This
On more than one occasion, Levy's provocateur antics nearly exposed the ADL's hand in fomenting domestic violence, ladies and gentlemen, and here's the truth of how these people operate, and here's the truth of anti-Semitism in America, and here's the truth of swastikas painted on synagogues and on the headstones in Jewish cemeteries. On February the 16th, 1979, Levy, using the pseudonym James Gutman, filed an application with the United States Park Service in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to obtain permission to hold a rally. Now remember, this is Levy, using the pseudonym James Gutman, a German name. I wonder why he did that. Well, you're going to find out. The rally permit, ladies and gentlemen, sought by Levy, a member of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, supposedly existing for the protection of Jews. The rally permit sought by Levy, a member of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, supposedly existing for the protection of Jews. The rally permit sought by Levy, also known as Gutman on this occasion, was not filed in the name of the JDL, which he was also a member of. Levy was posing as a leader of the American Nazi Party. Levy was posing as a leader of the American Nazi Party, seeking a permit for a Ku Klux Klan and Nazi Party rally at Independence Hall, the site of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Remember, I told you about the Hegelian method of political conflict resolution? Remember, I told you there's no such thing as a patriot community? Remember, I told you that these people who are bringing about the New World Order control both sides of every issue. Indeed, they create the issues. According to the rally permit, Levy was planning a white power rally to show white masses unity of white race and to show the world niggers and Jews are cowards. Among the paraphernalia Levy listed on the application were swastikas, banners, Nazi uniforms, KKK paraphernalia, will burn cross, swastika picket signs saying Hitler was right, gas commie Jews. Verbatim quote. Working out of the Philadelphia offices of the Jewish Defense League, Levy organized local chapters of the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and neo-Nazi groups to attend the Independence Hall rally. And these racist fools, not knowing that he was a Jewish member of the ADL and the JDL, fell right into line and did his bidding. Like the little puppet jerks that they are. In the case of the Trenton, New Jersey Ku Klux Klan, Levy had an inside track. Listen to this. James Rosenberg, also known as Jimmy Mitchell and Jimmy Anderson, a full-time paid employee of the Anti-Defamation League fact-finding division, had successfully infiltrated the local chapter of the Klan. Rosenberg had recently attempted unsuccessfully to get some of the local KKKers to blow up the Trenton headquarters of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP.
What's interesting is that the Jewish community, they've controlled entertainment, they've controlled Hollywood, they've controlled art images and what other ethnic groups think of themselves, but they try to absolve themselves of it, and what they'll do is they'll go, oh, this is all toxic white males doing this.
And raised up in Strong Island, so you know I know all about my peeps, my niggas in the ghetto. I design and own Timmy Hilniger 125% authentic ghetto activewear.
Hilniger keeps it real.
Timmy's got all the latest gear. If you want to keep it really real, never get out of the ghetto, stay broke, and continue to add to my multi-billion-dollar corporation, keep buying all my gear. The Timmy Hilniger collection.
I like this. You guys have both seen the overnight ratings. They're through the roof. Mazel tov. But in this business, we have to be 1, 2, 3 steps ahead.
All right, I'm in Jerusalem at the Machane Yehuda market. I'm looking for the apartheid.
That's why I brought in Myrna Goldfarb. She's the best media consultant in the biz. She's going to help us out.
Okay, in Israel, I am looking for the apartheid. I just asked all these people, not one person is able to tell me where the apartheid is. So I'm asking you on this platform, since you're so smart, to tell me where I can go to actually witness the apartheid. You guys know where the apartheid is? No idea. No one knows where the apartheid is, but I'm sure you can tell me. Let me know where the apartheid in Israel is.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say I love your show. It's very courageous. You know, my parents marched in Selma, Alabama with Dr. King.
Why are you here?
Good question. Straight to the point. I like your style. Because of the content of the show, we're going to expect some very spirited reactions.
Myrna's here just to plan our strategy, just in case.
All right. The best defense is offense.
Really, I thought it was the other way around.
Exactly. Okay, I think we're on the same page. Now, I've mapped out some strategies that are going to help bolster our position. Which is? Lighten up, man, right? This is about fun, right? Nice, wholesome fun.
Hey, Myrna, break it down for them.
Okay, the Mantan Manifesto. Catchy, ain't it?
So is syphilis.
Number 1, we gainfully employ African Americans in front of and behind the camera. You gotta cover yourselves, people, very important. I'm talking, I need a black grip, a black gaffer, a black PA, have them there. Number 2, let the audience decide. 3, who put these critics in charge anyway, right?
Right.
These so-called cultural police. 4, who determines what is black?
Yeah, what is black?
Yes, okay? Sleep and Eat and Mantan are lazy and unemployed, but we are certainly not saying anything about the entire African-American community. They're slackers.
Slackers?
I took a couple of years after graduate school and walked around the European countryside. It's not the biggest deal in the world. Okay, wear kente cloth. Invoke the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King. You know, use the word community often when talking about Mantan. And finally, our biggest asset is you, Pierre Delacroix.
Me?
Yes, you.
Me?
Yes, you.
How?
Well, you see, this show was created and conceived by you, right? A non-threatening African-American male.
Hang on to the west as it spins around. Just don't let the spin get you down. Things are moving fast.
when really they've had control of all the images that have portrayed and pervaded on screen, and they compromised themselves to fit into America. So they were there during all the blackface era and all the studios who aired all this footage. And so currently today in entertainment, you'll find there's a tokenization that's happening, and it's always been prevalent to play a certain stereotype, but right now we're being tokenized in a different way. And they made everything about identity and inclusion and had everyone focused on now their gender and now sexuality and kids being able to have surgeries. And yeah, so it's been a lot of strange stuff going on, but they've been promoting this in entertainment so that they can get everyone focused on identity, because that's how that particular community survives. They survive off identity victimhood. So in order for them to stay in the positions of power that they've been in, as far as inclusion goes and finances goes, they need everyone else to be in a state of victimhood. You have to understand, when division is being promoted, it's to get the general public to police each other while the people on top pass policies on their poor behalf. Social issues to wealthy people are considered poor people issues, whether that's climate change or equality. It's something to keep you fighting, because in general, we have no control over Mother Earth. Even though there's this idea that we do, we don't. There's always been climate change. There's not much we can do about it. I think the earth could crack open right now and swallow up an entire city. And there's not much we can do about that if the earth decided to swallow a city. It had nothing to do with the fact that we had a factory or we had an iPhone. But long story short, they want all of us fighting on the bottom. And so they promoted this whole idea around identity politics and identity until people started caring about Palestinian identity on October 7th, and they've showed that they actually don't care. They don't care, because that's the wrong identity. So, you guys, I want you to sit back and enjoy this next section of the episode, because this goes into what the play is and how they operate. And that should carry us out. Thank you, guys.
The major problem of Israel is with the young generation of the black community. Black Lives Matter starts there. I had last week a dinner, sit-down dinner at my house for 40 people, which are considered the leadership of the black community, and it's very important people. They can be part of our doing an activity.
Dr. Clarence B. Jones, who wrote the draft speech for Martin Luther King, I Had a Dream. He was his lawyer, he was his close friend, he was somebody that I reached out to, he became a very close and personal friend. Because of that relationship, he published 3 articles at the Huffington Post explaining why their agenda was hijacked. Martin Luther King will turn in his grave if he saw the anti-Israel tendencies or policies that are starting to emerge within Black Lives Matter.
Soon after Black Lives Matter declared support for BDS, a fundraiser at a New York nightclub was suddenly cancelled. The venue's management said it didn't approve of the movement's stance on Israel. Tony was told by his boss, Eric, that the Israel Project was behind the decision.
I don't know if you saw, but this club, ditched a Black Lives Matter event. One of our donors, we just put in a call to him, and then he put in a call to the police.
Madam President, for well over half a century, Jews have been disproportionately represented in efforts to finally secure dignity and equality for Black people and other people of color. This exceptional role has long been recognized by civil rights giants like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Aduh, bobo. Wajib Pak Widi dah tu.
For Jews who have suffered so much at the hands of bigots and whose history of persecution traces back to slavery and forced exile from their homeland millennia ago, hostility and discrimination on the basis of physical appearance is intolerable. More often than not, the same racists who hate black people hate Jewish people no less. Sadly though, some believe that this is acceptable to express anti-Semitism, to defame Jews, attack their identity or history, or deny their equal rights, especially in Israel, while advocating for the rights of others. They seek to exploit the movement for black equality, or to break deep and historic black Jewish bonds. They must not succeed.
Huh?
I'm not a politician. I'm not about a religion. I'm an Israelite. Don't call me black no more. That word is only a color. It ain't facts no more. It ain't facts no more. It ain't facts no more. Buzzing. Radars is buzzing. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Today, it is prohibited, and you can Google this, to do a DNA test in Israel. Totally forbidden. Wrong. It's illegal. It's a crime. You'll be jailed if you do a DNA test in Israel. Why? Because they know the truth will come out. You come from Poland, you come from Ukraine, you came from Europe, you came from everywhere else. And they were the original Middle Eastern Jews who lived together with the Muslims and the Christians for centuries. For centuries. So what happened to a lot of the Jews?
They seek to exploit the movement for black equality, or to break deep and historic black Jewish bonds. They must not succeed.
Huh?
Racism and anti-Semitism are fundamentally interconnected, as is the struggle against them. Thank you, Madam President.
Did you ever look up the word black in a dictionary?
For what?
Did you ever study anything that wasn't part of some con?
What the hell for, man?
Come with me. Black, destitute of light, devoid of color, enveloped in darkness, hence utterly dismal or gloomy, as the future looked black.
Pretty good with them words, ain't you?
Soiled with dirt, foul, sullen, hostile, forbidding, as a black day. Foully or outrageously wicked, as black cruelty, indicating disgrace, dishonor, or culpability. And there's others, black male, black bald, black guard.
Yeah, well, that's something all right.
Let's look up white. Here. Read.
White, of the color of pure snow, reflecting all the rays of the spectrum, the opposite of black. Free from spot or blemish, innocent, pure. Huh. Ain't this something? Without evil intent, harmless, honest, square dealing, and honorable. Wait a minute, but this was written by white folks though, right? I mean, this is white folks' book.
This sure ain't no black man's book.
So what we reading this one for?
Because the truth is lying there, if you read behind the words.
The less we identify with being black, and the more we identify with being African, the more we empower our diaspora, the more we empower our continent, and the more we empower our global solidarity. Blackness as a concept is nothing but a tool of historical erasure. It is a tactic, it is a war tactic, used to rebrand and redefine a population of people to remove them further from the people that they truly are. Blackness, or whiteness for that matter, does not exist in reality. It only exists under the guise and the lens of white supremacy. The utility of blackness is to convince a population of people not to identify with their humanity first, not to identify with their land first, not to identify with their resources, their power first, but to first identify with their position, with their situation inside of a binary system of race that colonial powers have created. Blackness as a concept is in direct opposition with whiteness. Therefore, for the entirety of history, they will exist in a polarity. Whiteness is nothing but a gravity well that pulls any and everything in to wipe it clean and dilute the true essence of people for the comforts and the desires of white people. If we identify with our Africanness first, there is nothing that they can use to physically, mentally, and psychologically enslave you as they have done before. The more you identify with your Africanness, the more you are equipped to unequip the white power structure of its power and its hold on the world.
The ADL has been praised for their efforts to protect individuals and groups from bias, discrimination, and hate, which has landed the ADL's education materials in the curriculums of public schools, granted them the opportunity to provide training within the police system, and given them sway in the boardrooms of media conglomerates and leading technology monopolies, like Google, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. The scope of their influence cannot be understated. On the flip side, criticism of the ADL involves them being an anti-Gentile, pro-Israel group masquerading as a progressive civil rights organization, which promotes the us versus them narrative that once only consisted of Gentile versus Jew, but has now expanded to men versus women, black versus white, straight versus gay, pretty much any divisive agenda imaginable. The ADL champions. Then labels any criticism against the group they claim to protect as hate speech. But the ADL doesn't really protect these groups. It harms them. It exploits them. It teaches them to view themselves as victims of a hostile world. Without victimhood, without racial provocation, the ADL has no need to exist. So how much of the hatred is real and how much is manufactured? This criticism, along with that line of questioning, is labeled, you guessed it, anti-Semitism.
Who can make war with the beast? There are problems everywhere. International war, genocide in Gaza, the end of the First Amendment, censorship, pedophilia, homophilia, LGBT, all of this aggression, boys being taught that they should be girls, girls being taught that they're boys, mass confusion, mass deception, economic crisis, everything we can imagine that can make a world go awry. The destruction of the family unit, mother, father, child, all being systematically, intentionally annihilated and destroyed. Problems. Problems are everywhere. But the question is not, what are the problems? The question is, what is the problem? And the one thing we haven't done is tell the truth about who's behind it. And the truth is that Jews are the problem. First they depict black people in blackface. And now, today you got whiteface. How do you have the commander-in-chief, the most powerful nation on the planet, senile, can't keep his hand off little children? Who's making these decisions? Black versus white versus black, Muslim versus black, Muslim versus white, Christian versus Muslim. Who's doing this? All of us spinning around in a circle. Who's doing this? You know the answer. Nobody wants to say it. I'll say it. And I'll say it so that none of us can deny it. And then we can do something about it. Jews are the problem. So they drop the physical bombs on the people of Gaza. They drop the internal bomb in the veins of the people, Fauci, COVID-19 in America. Boom. Same people, same results. death, bloodshed, genocide. Jews are the problem. We all know that America will protect the Jews from Hamas. The question we have to ask ourselves, who will protect American citizens from the Jews? When the vast majority of the power positions in your executive branch of government is composed of individuals who supposedly make up 2% of the population, but yet control your banks, control your media, which takes the minds of the people and creates the narratives that drive your society to complete bankruptcy and destruction. You have to consider, has your country actually been overthrown? Is this your country anymore? Is this the United States of America? Or are we now living in Western Israel? We look, we say, the Palestinians, what chances do they have? They're surrounded by the IDF on all sides. And we think we pity them. But in America, are we Ameristinians? This tiny minority of well-organized people. At the black world, the white world, the Asian world, the Hispanic world, all of us are surrounded. The large majority of the world population is surrounded by a tiny fraction who are organized and prepared to destroy all of us. If we allow this tiny minority of people to destroy all of us at the same time, perhaps we deserve it. Who can make war with the beast? Let's talk about it.
Like, we're going to be more pro-Israel than you can even imagine. Just to, like, provoke everyone. The majority of Americans are pro-Israel. Whereas if you take the poll of Israel in the UK, it's just pure hatred of Israel. Your country, like, basically let half of Pakistan move in, you know? So you have a different problem than we do here.
The protesters are on a fellowship program run by a conservative think tank called the Hoover Institution.
This is actually the first foot soldier activity that I think we've been forced to do.
It was basically just like Noah Pollock coming and being like, look, there are these jihadis who basically support suicide bombing, and they're at a campus, and you have to stop them.
A chance to shout at Arabs?
As we're leaving, we mentioned to our boss yesterday that we're going. She's like, oh yeah, that's mandatory. You need to go. Do you know what my worst nightmare is? I'm actually not kidding. It's a photo of Dion and I together, and we're just like clearly identifiable, and they're like, oh, who are these like traitors who sold out to the Jewish conspiracy for money? I'm like, we did. We cost $50,000 plus benefits. So they did a really job of getting me excited to show up and protest.
It's kind of the way you're putting it kind of sounds a bit like astroturfing.
No. This is astroturf. No, this is actually the definition. There's a bus.
What does that mean?
So it's when you set up things.
It's the difference between grassroots and astroturf.
You're taking corporate money and you're manufacturing the image of a grassroots movement with corporate money by basically paying people to appear as activists.
It's not that astroturf thing is wrong. It's just that like your astroturf has to be like committed.
If you do happen to speak with any reporters, just stay on message. And what is that message? SJP is a hate group. BDS is a hate movement. The only other thing you probably want to mention is that SJP endorses violence, terrorism, things like that. And you guys are going to be great.
Hey, SJP, what do you think of this?
Woo!
You agree? Resistance? Child suicide bombers?
Real baby killers, these terrorists. They kill women, they kill children, they don't care about anything. Rape women too, all the time.
As Israel has ramped up the severity of its genocidal occupation of Palestine since October 7, Palestinian people have continued to fight back. and their resistance has been controversial and intolerable to many people. That is especially the case with the favorite tools of the ruling class: media pundits, politicians, and celebrities. These people make up what some like to call a misleadership class. Those so-called leaders who are shoved in our faces as people we should follow, but have genuinely nowhere to take us. These African misleaders who support Israel have become more and more visible.
Hamas must be disbanded and destroyed immediately.
And lots of people I know are confused about that. Like, what are you doing, LeBron James? The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, the most influential pro-Israel lobbying group in the US, has greased the palms of Black Congress members with around $3.6 million since February 2022. They have also historically targeted Black candidates and elected officials who won't fall in line to support Israel. So it should come as no surprise that the Black misleadership class have consistently backed Israel. The truth is that there is a long history of Zionism attempting to attach itself to African people and our liberation struggles. Here's a quick history lesson. It's 1920, and there's a man named Chaim Weizmann who's just taken over as president of the World Zionist Organization. If that sounds familiar to you, it's because it's the name of the organization founded by Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, a political ideology that has tried to hijack Judaism for imperialist causes. Quick disclaimer, not all Jews are Zionists, not all Zionists are Jews. Word to y'all boy Biden.
You need not be a Jew to be a Zionist.
Anyway, Weizmann comes into the leadership of the org, and one of the first things he does is a speaking tour in the United States. He thought it would be valuable to seek out the support of African people in the US, and was connected easily to the Black church by Stephen Wise, a popular US rabbi who later went on to become one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or what many in the US call the NAACP. Weizmann came up with the idea of going on a tour of Black churches, and it was set up with the support of Wise and a combination of individuals and organizations. His goal was to garner public support for the establishment of a Jewish nation. During his time in the US, arrangements were made for Weizmann to meet with a number of prominent leaders and other African clergy. At the time, it was really easy to exploit the idea baked into the word Zion, especially among African followers of the Bible. And that's because in the US at the time, you had millions of Africans whose ancestors had been stolen from Africa, forced into slavery, only to fight their way out and find themselves in a living hell. Jim Crow, widespread lynching, straight up apartheid. Unfortunately, it was too easy to convince a lot of Africans in the US that their idea of returning home and the Zionist idea of returning home were the same. A lot of our heroes fell for this political trickery. In 1948, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote an entire address to the American Jewish Congress titled America's Responsibility to Israel. Though I have to point out that he later revised his position on this. And in many cases, Zionists were also able to twist the words and sentiments of such figures after they died to associate their causes with Zionism. By the 1950s, the civil rights movement was in full swing in the United States, and the Zionist cause found some support in the movement's biggest star, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The SCLC was a predominantly Christian organization that employed nonviolent direct action strategies in the struggle for civil rights for Africans in the United States. And out of the SCLC grew a call for a new student-led initiative, one whose youthful vibrance and impatience with the status quo would come to evolve the ideology of the U.S. civil rights movements and buck up against the way the entire country talked about Zionism. Thus was born SNCC, short for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was formed by young activists, including now prominent figures like Ella Baker, Diane Nash, and Julian Bond. SNCC began in 1960 as a political organization mostly focused on acquiring voting and civil rights for Africans in the US. But by 1967, their ideology had begun to adopt anti-capitalism and anti-imperialism. This was largely due to a growing internationalist and Pan-Africanist outlook among its members. Members like a woman named Ethel Minor. As a journalist, she quickly became the editor of the SNCC newsletter in the summer of 1967. This was a crucial turning point in the Zionist occupation of Palestine. That June, the world witnessed the Six-Day War. That's when, over the course of 6 days, Israel captured territories from its neighbors, including the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. In the midst of this, staffers at the SNCC newsletter decided the organization had a responsibility to speak out. As editor, Ethel Minor oversaw a rich print feature, including an objective critique of the facts and an interactive game for Africans in the US to test their knowledge of the Zionist occupation. The ending of her letter from the editor read as follows.
Since we know that the white American press seldom, if ever, gives the true story about world events in which America is involved, then we are taking this opportunity to present the following documented facts on this problem. These facts not only affect the lives of our brothers in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, but also pertain to our struggle here.
The day these papers hit the streets was incredibly significant, because SNCC had officially posed a formidable challenge to the line on Israel held by the establishment of the US Civil Rights Movement. And they pissed a lot of Zionists off too. Like, a lot. While it is true that many Jewish organizations in the US financially supported the Civil Rights Movement, so did many Zionist organizations. And with SNCC's loud rebuke of Zionism came an even louder snatching back of them checks. Critics accused the language and graphics of the paper of being anti-Semitic, a common Zionist deflection tactic. They were slammed in the press as a Negro extremist group. Theodore Bickel, a popular US singer and actor who claimed to be in solidarity with the Civil Rights Movement, wrote a whole hit piece called A Farewell to SNCC, where he denounced the young organization and rubbed MLK all in their faces. And unfortunately, when asked for comment on the SNCC newsletter, MLK himself hit them back. This is how Kwame Ture remembers it.
Any attack on Israel, this is a quote, any attack on Israel, no matter how you camouflage it, is an attack on Semitism, is anti-Semitic. Paul King was confused.
The backlash against SNCC was swift and brutal. Kwame Ture, who was the acting chairman of SNCC at the time Minor issued the newsletter, said in 1988, "Once we attacked the state of Israel, SNCC was closed down in 3 months. Not only did the media go on attack, but the liberals, non-Jewish liberals, were jumping over each other to attack us." Though SNCC ultimately met its end, their anti-Zionist contribution to the US freedom struggle birthed many formations. It was the bedrock of the anti-Zionist analysis of the Black Power movement in the United States, from the Black Panther Party to the Revolutionary Action Movement to the Republic of New Africa and the All African People's Revolutionary Party. But it also spurred reactionary formations, like the Black Americans Support Israel Committee, or BASIC. Yes, BASIC. It was founded in 1975 by civil rights figures like A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin. According to both of them, BASIC was designed to fight back against the efforts of newly independent African states that were trying to expel Israel from the United Nations, or at least condemn the Zionist state. Over the course of history, our consciousness of the Zionist occupation of Israel has evolved. But in many ways, we can still see how Zionism attempts to obscure our worldview. For young African people in the US today, It's our responsibility to remember our people's path of radical solidarity against Zionism in the United States.
For over a century, the Anti-Defamation League has cultivated its reputation as the premier organization dealing with matters of anti-Semitism and is almost always brought in to judge its alleged incidents. In one analysis, researchers found that the ADL was mentioned in 2/3 of 46,000 articles mentioning white nationalism from 2018 to 2019. Despite the ADL's reputation in the media as an infallible anti-racist organization, the ADL has long been accused of selectively deploying accusations of anti-Semitism and being purveyors of anti-Black and anti-Palestinian racism themselves. And that's exactly what I saw at the ADL's annual anti-Semitism conference, Never Is Now, held in New York City. The conference began with a few speeches speaking generally about the evils of anti-Semitism, but within a half hour or so, the conference moved on to the real issue at hand. Under the guise of morphing threats of anti-Semitism, ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt began laying out a picture of a world fully gripped by the forces of anti-Semitism. A world where, wait for it, Ben & Jerry's would no longer sell ice cream to Israeli settlers.
Brands like Ben & Jerry's, who knew when they announced that they would not sell ice cream in the West Bank, it effectively would end their presence in all of Israel.
If you're scratching your head right now, I don't really blame you. When most people think of the morphing threat of anti-Semitism, they're usually not talking about Cherry Garcia. So what does this have to do with anti-Semitism? Well, it all comes down to how you define anti-Semitism. Most people would say anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jewish people. This would include acts of violence, threats, slurs, and racist tropes. But for decades, the ADL has desperately tried to attach another article onto the definition of anti-Semitism: criticism of the state of Israel. Ben & Jerry's, according to the ADL, is anti-Semitic because they took up a call from Palestinians to boycott Israel for its human rights abuses. In fact, the entire focus of the conference was not identifying or confronting far-right groups and ideologies, but instead legitimizing this pro-Israel definition of anti-Semitism. Nearly half the panels scheduled for that day were explicitly about equating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. The first panel I went to was called New Tactics in Anti-Semitism, and I thought maybe this has something to do with the rise of the far right. Nope. This entire panel was dedicated to attacking a website called the Mapping Project, a website which tracks ties that different Massachusetts institutions have to Israel. Now, even though nothing on the website is factually untrue, the panel felt so threatened by the website that one of the panelists actually said that the concept behind the Mapping Project was the exact same as the Tree of Life synagogue shooting, which was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history.
The Mapping Project, and I'm going to be blunt, is the same underlying conspiracy theory as the man who murdered 11 Jews in Pittsburgh.
The shooter, Robert Gregory Bowers, was a hardened neo-Nazi who obsessively posted about a made-up Jewish plot to flood white countries with immigrants. While the panel about the Mapping Project went on for about an hour, there was not a single mention of white supremacist groups on a panel called New Tactics in Anti-Semitism. The next panel I went to was dedicated solely to whether or not criticism of Israel can be differentiated from anti-Semitism. On this panel, the moderator came up with all kinds of scenarios where the panelists were supposed to decide whether certain criticisms of Israel were anti-Semitic or legitimate. So, is it possible to not be anti-Semitic while criticizing Israel? Apparently not. Every single scenario presented to the panelists was called anti-Semitic. And while I could go through each of the different scenarios, the most memorable was that opposing weapons transfers to Israel was anti-Semitic because...
What do these people want? More dead Jews?
I'm sure to most of you it's clear that this is ridiculous, but part of the problem is that this conference was explicitly targeted at middle school and high school students who got in for free.
Our goal is to prepare our children before they ever get to the college campus on how to deal with anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism.
In practice, this meant that you had incredibly young people who are highly impressionable hearing this completely biased definition of anti-Semitism from people they saw as absolute authorities. One of the biggest issues in the ADL's eyes was that certain unnamed marginalized groups have allegedly become the biggest purveyors of anti-Semitism.
Certain marginalized groups seem to be some of the biggest offenders of anti-Semitism. People don't want to talk about that.
And what's really sad is that so many other minority groups have joined this bandwagon, that a lot of the national anti-Israel organizations have made it their cause for the last 20 years to equate the Palestinian problem with the problems of racism in this country. It is not a racial conflict. And those kinds of equations are just stupid, and they don't belong on campus.
The implication that black people are somehow the face of anti-Semitism has been a consistent theme throughout the history of the ADL. In 2019, the ADL smeared Ilhan Omar as an anti-Semite for tweeting out that the American Israel Political Affairs Committee donating to politicians might have an impact on their positions on Israel. In 2018, the ADL led a campaign against then CNN commentator Mark Lamont Hill for saying, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which the ADL said was a coded message that secretly meant that Hill wanted to destroy the state of Israel. The ADL campaign got Hill fired from CNN. Going back to the 1980s, the ADL blocked anti-racist school curricula prepared by the National Anti-Klan Network because they deemed it too radical. And in 1967, the ADL compared the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to a black version of the KKK because of its support for Palestine. To this day, the ADL still conditions its support for black liberation movements on whether or not they support Israel. In 2016, the ADL denounced the Black Lives Matter movement after BLM released a policy platform criticizing Israel. Despite releasing multiple statements condemning the murder of George Floyd, the ADL will never tell you that they're one of the largest non-governmental sponsors of police exchanges between the United States and Israel, where repressive policing tactics are exchanged. So it really comes as no surprise that there's been a historically instinctive solidarity between anti-racist and Palestinian protesters facing off against tear gas and repression. Historically, white Europeans have always been the main purveyors of anti-Semitism, not black people. But for an organization hell-bent on blurring the connection between the Palestinian struggle and the struggle of other oppressed nationalities, the long history of black Palestinian solidarity constitutes a tremendous threat. This strong support for Palestine among oppressed nationalities is also why there's so many white nationalists who, despite their vicious anti-Semitism, support Israel. Richard Spencer, who famously sig-heiled Trump's 2016 presidential victory, is actually an outspoken supporter of Israel. Why? Because, in his own words, Israel resembles the type of white-only ethno-state he wants to create in the US. Israel is a two-tiered legal system, one set of rule for Jews and another for Arabs. Israel has Jewish-only roads and Jewish-only schools. Jews have one type of ID while Arabs have another. Israelis are free to travel anywhere in Palestine, whereas Arabs are forced to apply for travel permits and endure brutal and humiliating checkpoints. The legal system also fosters a deeply racist mentality towards Arabs. Polls show that about half of Israeli high schoolers don't think Arabs should have the right to vote. Another poll showed that almost half of Israeli Jews don't want Arabs teaching their kids. It's basically an Israeli version of Jim Crow. After publishing a video titled 10 Reasons I Hate the Jews, Gavin McInnes, founder of the Proud Boys, declared that he likes Israel as, quote, more than a friend, and that they should stop apologizing for everything, like their immigration policy. Israel's immigration policy towards non-Jews is incredibly harsh, especially towards Africans. In 2015, Israel passed a law that would require non-Jewish African migrants to either leave Israel or go to prison. And Israeli politicians often liken African migrants to a cancer on Israeli society. Even Jonathan Greenblatt himself, for all the lip service he gives about opposing Trump's racism, was happy to accept the Trump administration's invitation to see the U.S. Embassy to Israel move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. White supremacists correctly see Israel as a racist Jewish supremacist state. They celebrate the European colonization of Palestine for the same reason they celebrate Europe's conquest of the Americas. And they admire the way the state of Israel has made the indigenous Arabs a subjugated class on their own land. But for the ADL, supporting a country admired by white supremacists for being a model ethno-state is apparently not a contradiction. Likewise, Israel's consistent support for white supremacist ethno-states also didn't seem to register as a cause for concern for the self-proclaimed anti-Semitism watchdog. Israel was one of the few countries in the world to recognize the legitimacy of apartheid South Africa. Initially, Israel was hostile towards South Africa because so many leading figures in the South African government supported the Nazis. But it eventually got over it as Israel realized that it had far more in common with South Africa as a fellow apartheid state than they had differences. The two countries signed a secret agreement in 1975 to exchange weapons when both countries were under international arms embargoes for their violations of international law. While Israel went to great lengths to try to cover up this relationship, recently uncovered documents indicate that Israel offered to sell apartheid South Africa nuclear weapons. It's widely believed that the 1979 Vila incident, where U.S. satellites detected an explosion off of South Africa's coast, was actually a joint Israeli-South African nuclear weapons test. While the U.S. government's official story was that the explosion was possibly a meteorite hitting the Earth, several nuclear scientists and U.S. intelligence agents said the commission investigating the explosion was set up to arrive at a non-nuclear explanation so the U.S. wouldn't have to sanction Israel for violating the Limited Test Ban Treaty. Israel also played a major role in arming Rhodesia, the name of a British settler colony and apartheid state that occupied present-day Zimbabwe. While Israel publicly condemned Rhodesia, privately, Israel was pouring weapons into Rhodesia in a desperate attempt to prop up the apartheid regime, which, like South Africa, couldn't buy weapons due to international sanctions. Israel gave Rhodesia the license to manufacture the infamous Israeli Uzi submachine gun, which Rhodesians renamed the Ruzi, and exclusively sold it to its white citizens. Israel also used private companies to hide sales of Bell 205 helicopters to Rhodesia, using apartheid South Africa as a supply route. These helicopters, which were being converted into gunships, were the single most important weapon in the Rhodesian government's war against African liberation fighters, and it was Israel who helped them acquire them. Today, Israel still helps give cover to white supremacists outside of its own territory. In December, Israel welcomed a delegation from the Ukrainian Azov Battalion, a special forces detachment in the Ukrainian military most known for its support for Nazism. The insignia of the Azov Battalion is the Wolfsangel, an ancient European symbol most notably appropriated by the Nazis. Several divisions of the Waffen-SS used the Wolfsangel as their logo. An earlier version of the Azov logo featured an even more overtly white supremacist symbol, the Sonnenrad, or Black Sun. The Sonnenrad was also appropriated and used by Nazis, and today is a symbol widely used by neo-Nazi groups. Peyton Gendron, the white supremacist murderer who carried out a mass shooting targeting black people in Buffalo, New York, wore this symbol in a photo he took of himself while wearing a tactical vest. The symbol also appeared on the cover of the Christchurch Shooters Manifesto, titled The Great Replacement. Ironically, both of these symbols are identified as anti-Semitic hate symbols on the ADL's website. Despite the fact that you can find dozens of images online of members of the Azov Battalion waving swastikas and throwing up the Sieg Heil salute, Israeli politicians and soldiers happily met with these anti-Semites. Since the war in Ukraine began, Western governments and media outlets have been working overtime to downplay the Azov Battalion's clear ties to Nazism. Instead of condemning the Western media's attempt to whitewash the Azov Battalion, the ADL obediently followed this trend by rewriting its own understanding of the battalion. Until recently, the ADL correctly recognized Azov's far-right tendencies and wrote a report that included details of its ties to fascist groups in America. But in December, the ADL responded to a hate incident reported by the Gray Zone to the ADL, in which a member of the Azov Battalion who donned the supremacist Sonnenrad tattoo was hosted and honored at a Pentagon-funded sports competition. Instead of condemning the competition for hosting a Nazi, the ADL responded 60 days after the inquiry, saying that the Azov Battalion was actually no longer an anti-Semitic organization. Try telling that to the Azov guy with a Nazi tattoo. Anti-war activists have repeatedly warned that heavy weapons sent to Ukraine would inevitably end up in the hands of far-right groups like the Azov Battalion. In fact, there's a video of a Ukrainian neo-Nazi group, C14, bragging about how they'd siphon off many of the weapons sent to Ukraine by Western countries.
Уявіть собі, скільки в нас зброї, скільки в нас ветеранів. А це є, вже йдеться про те, що нові політичні альянси вже глобального рівня, нові політичні виклики.
According to the ADL's own website, the Azov Battalion hosts white supremacist groups from around the world, including the United States, so they can fight in the Donbass, gain combat experience, and take it home with them. You can find tons of articles online documenting this connection, and even the US government, which has been the biggest military backer of Ukraine, was concerned about white supremacists in the US traveling to Ukraine to connect with white supremacists there. Despite all of the evidence of neo-Nazis treating Ukraine like an international training ground, the ADL invited a speaker from Ukraine to their conference to ask the attendees to pressure Washington to send even more weapons to Ukraine. You gotta ask yourself if it's actually beneficial to young Jews to scaremonger about this fake threat of Palestinians when there's very real anti-Semitism out there. But it's clear that this completely warped view of anti-Semitism is no accident. The ADL wants Jews to believe that the biggest threats to Jewish people are the ice cream boycott and the proliferation of Levantine history. Because if they actually had to criticize all anti-Semitism, white nationalism, and Nazism, they'd have to criticize Israel and all of its racist allies.
The fact of the matter is, the ADL is nothing more than a well-funded PR campaign for a rogue apartheid state that's lost all international legitimacy. The increasingly desperate rhetoric coming from the ADL reflects an increasingly desperate situation for a country trying to maintain colonialism in a world that will no longer...
Little Mary Fagin, she went to town one day. She went to the pencil factory to get her little pay. She left her home at 7. She kissed her mother goodbye. Not one time did the poor child think that she was going to die. Then a villain met her with a brutal heart, we know. He smiled and said to Mary, "You go home no more." He sneaked along behind her till she reached the metal room. He laughed and said, "Little Mary, you've met your fatal doom." Lee was the watchman, and when he wound the key, away down in the basement, little Mary he could see. He called for the policemen, their names I do not know. They came to the pencil factory and told Newt he must go. Her mother sits a-weeping, she weeps and moans all day. She prays to meet her baby in a better world someday. Judge Long passed the sentence, you bet he did not fail. Solicitor Hugh Dorsey, he sent the Brith to jail. Astonished at the question, the angels they did say, why he killed poor Mary upon one holiday. Now come all you good people, wherever you may be, supposing little Mary belonged to you or me.
They stole our Jewish name. They stole my identity. They are not the real Jews. To Gilad, the fact that I was robbed is not nearly as bad as what the robbers did with my credit card. You know what? Maybe. My concern as somebody whose identity was robbed is not what the robbers did with my birth certificate. It's the fact that they stole my birth certificate, and because of that, number one, we Jews are blamed for anybody that has complaints against the Zionists. There's a second problem with the Israeli identity theft. We have people like Gilad, good people, who now want to throw away...
What about, you don't agree that...
who want to throw away their Jewishness because they were led to believe that Jewishness is some kind of identity, some kind of political identity.
I do think that the ADL helps to reinforce our Jewish identity because we're not Orthodox and we don't have a religious Jewish life. The ADL provides a forum to be Jewish. I mean, it certainly is 99.9% Jewish, and it gives us an opportunity to explore being Jewish, to look at Jewish issues, and it does reinforce our Jewish identity.
And you know what? If that was Jewishness, I'd be a self-hating Jew too. The Jew that he hates in him, I hate also. But that's not what I call a Jew.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that episode. Stay tuned for the next part. Much love. Peace.
They not like us. 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 You think the Bay gon' let you disrespect Pop, nigga? I think that Oakland show gon' be your last stop, nigga. They cold foul, I don't know why you still pretending. What is the owl? Bird niggas and bird bitches. Go. The audience not dumb. Shape the stories how you want. Hatred, they're not slow. Rabbit hole is still deep. I can go further, I promise. Ain't that something? B-Rap stands for bitch, and you Malibu most wanted. Ain't no love boy, you ball boy. Fresh Gatorade or something. Since 2009, I had this bitch jumping. You niggas will get a wedgie. Be flipped over your boxes or over your foe. The other vaginal option. Pussy, nigga better straighten they posture. Got famous all up in content. Might write this for the doctrine. Tell a pop star quit hiding. Fuck a caption, won't action. No accident, I'm hands on. He fuck around, get polished. Fucked on Wayne growing, he was in jail. That's conniving. Then get his face tatted like a bitch apologizing. I'm glad D-Rose came home, y'all didn't deserve him neither. From Alondra down to Central, nigga better not speak on Serena. And your homeboy needs subpoena. That predator moving flocks. That name gotta be registered and placed on neighborhood watch. I lean on you niggas like another line of walk. Yeah, it's all eyes on me and I'ma send it up the pot. Ay, put the roll label on me, I'ma get them drop. Ay, reaching music and I want